Joining me from Canberra, we have our Chief Political Correspondent, Paul Sakkal, as usual, and our Chief Political Commentator, James Massola. Welcome, gents.
Hello.
Thanks, Jack.
Today we're going to chew over the expenses scandal, if indeed we are calling it a scandal, that has engulfed the Communications Minister, Annika Wells, at precisely the moment when she wanted to be talking about the social media ban that was instituted this week. James, you've reported on all the expenses stories for us, and it's starting to look a lot like these Annika Wells' expenses have been raked over by, say, the Liberal Party Dirt Unit or other parties and then rolled out one by one to embarrass the minister at this pivotal moment. Would you care to comment on that without revealing your sources, of course?
Can we talk about how the sausage is made, or do we keep that? Hidden from public view?
I think that's important in this story.
Jackie, you're definitely correct that some of the information that was being sourced from publicly available information, that it was being circulated by the opposition, right? They've been a bit of a rabble, let's be frank, for the last 6 months or so, and it's like they've finally woken up and gone, oh, that's right. Our job is to hold the government of the day to account rather than tearing each other to bits. So some of it comes from there. Some of it has come from government sources, as in Labor on Labor violence, as in people who, for whatever reason, jealous of the minister and sort of wanting to take a bit of paint off. Perhaps they want to be the next cab off the rank in terms of promotion rather than seeing her again. And then again, some of this material has been sourced either independently or even by third parties, sectoral interests who are, disappointed with the minister and how she's handled one or other of her portfolios. Annika Wells, Jackie, let's be really clear. Annika Wells is a very talented minister. She's risen very quickly through the ranks into cabinet, and she's made some enemies along the way. So, not to reflect, even before you begin to reflect on her performance one way or another, she's got some enemies, and those enemies have relished this.
It is a really dirty business, yeah.
I'm happy to give some insight in terms of what I understand about the genesis of some of the information as well. I was talking to a couple of people who were integral to the May election campaign on the Liberal side this week. And these are people who are no longer in the show but were senior at the time. And they both asked me, why has this all come up now? And how come you guys didn't run any of this pre-election? Because this research had been done in a very thorough way by the opposition and their, dirt file unit, to put it crudely, and research unit, to put it in a more euphemistic term, before the election on Annika Wells, because there was a perception that she was a big user of entitlements and she loved the glitz and the glamour. And the difference is that when those bits of information were shopped around pre-election, the Liberal Party struggled to find a journalist interested to write them because there was no spark which set off the chain of events that has created this scandal. That spark came last week, I forget the day, around Thursday, when just before a Senate estimates hearing, which is the last moment at which the government was mandated to release this information.
I think it was Tuesday night, yeah.
Yeah, the information about her flights to New York were revealed. It had that headline, $100,000 number. That tweaks people's minds. It creates a narrative. And then each subsequent story fits into this narrative around one person. No other bit of spending looks as egregious, even though new examples emerge about other MPs. And so you get this pressure build up on the one character.
That's exactly what I was going to talk about, is the kind of the strange alchemy of what makes a story at any given moment. And as you say, it's the New York trip, and people immediately see New York as being kind of glitzy, I guess, and the $100,000 figure of the flights. And we discussed that last week. But this week, the caravan kind of moved on to the family entitlement stuff, which probably a lot of voters don't even really realise exists, the family entitlement or family reunion entitlement. So, James, can you just tell us how that works? And, so Annika Wells has been, has publicly declared, and now it has been extensively reported, that she's used this entitlement to bring her family, like her kids, to Thredbo for a work thing she was doing there as sports minister. And because she is sports minister, she's gone to a lot of grand finals and stuff, and she's brought her husband with her on the taxpayer dime.
Yep. Okay. So I'll try and keep it as brief as possible, Jax. Family entitlement rules. Partner of an MP can fly from home base city to Canberra up to 9 times a year, or the value of 9 business class flights, to be very specific. Children, up to 3 return flights from home base to Canberra. And then after that, 3 more business class flights from home base to city that is not Canberra. Now, those are the sort of broad parameters. There are exceptions that can be made for ministers, which allow extra flights, but that's it in a nutshell. So family entitlement rules exist to allow MPs who work very hard, like Minister Wells, for example, 3 young kids, all of that. They allow MPs to try and maintain some kind of normalcy, I guess, Jackie.
Yeah.
With
Maybe
family
to
life,
stay
see their
married
kids.
as well. I mean,
Exactly. There's a joke that does the rounds amongst MPs. There's not 4 status levels of frequent flyer. There's actually 5. It's like, I think, red, silver, gold, platinum, divorced. Right?
Yeah.
It's a bit of a gallows humor, but it's a good example.
In one of the MPs inductions meetings where they get former parliamentarians to talk to new MPs, they used to do this thing where they'd say, look to the 2 people around you. 2 out of 3 of you at the end of your time in Parliament won't have the partner that you're with. So it's something they're all very aware of. But I just wanted to go to this point, James. People have been defending these travel reunion entitlements this week on this basis, that they're important to keep families together and to encourage younger parents into Parliament. And I totally understand that, but I think most MPs understand the spirit of these rules, or the essence of these rules, to be kind of as follows: that if you spend a week in Canberra, for example, and then you have a committee hearing in Tasmania, and you have to go back to Canberra on Monday, but your family's in Brisbane, you can pay to bring the family to Tasmania, spend the weekend with you, see the MP for a bit, they go back home, you go to Canberra. But as this week has gone on, and the Australian has done some good work on Thursday, the Australian newspaper, in terms of tallying up Don Farrell and Sarah Hanson-Young's use of family reunion rules. Sarah Hanson-Young appears to have used family reunion entitlements to allow her husband, who's a lobbyist in Canberra, Ben Oaquist, who a lot of journalists know, good operator, 78 times since 2022. And Don Farrell has brought his wife on 136 flights, the equivalent of 3.7 movements around the globe in that same time frame, tallying up to more than $200,000 between the two. And there's a story in The Guardian today which says that those restrictions, or those limits that you referenced before, James, about 9 business class flights, apparently don't exist for ministers and other senior office holders. So effectively, these family reunion rules can be used as much as possible, which means that an MP can bring their spouse on the taxpayer dime wherever they go, whenever, as many times as possible. Now, that might keep families together, but I'm not sure that. I know we talk a lot about the pub test, but that seems like this is information we didn't know, and I don't think people realise that these entitlements were being used to this extent.
I mean, I'm inclined to agree with you, and I think that, even just because you have an entitlement doesn't mean that you should necessarily stretch the limits of the entitlement. But it is what it says on the tin. It's an entitlement, and they're taking what they're entitled to, right? And people are going to use whatever they're entitled to within the rules. And as Albanese and Annika Wells keep saying, she was within the rules. She was singled out, but I do, and I've spoken about this with a lot of women that I know. Annabelle Crabb wrote a really good column about it on the ABC Online, about whether or not there's a gender element in particular to Annika Wells being singled out. She's a sports minister, so she has to go to all these sporting events. If we want to attract young women who have children, small children, and marriages that they presumably want to keep intact into the ministry, then we've got to allow these arrangements and these crazy jobs that they have to be a little bit more family friendly.
Jackie, I agree with you up to a point, right? I think Annika Wells is a super talent. I think she'll recover from this in time. I think, as she gleefully predicted yesterday, she'll be found to have used it will be found by the IPIA that everything she's done, or just about everything she's done, is within entitlements, right? But that's the thing, and this goes to Paul's point. Like, does this pass the pub test, or the kitchen table test, or the common sense test or whatever. And I don't believe it does.
I know, but
so
then...
if you look, no, Jackie, please, if you look at her travel to the 50th birthday of the former Victorian MP, Peter Murphy, that's the one that really sticks with me. So Annika Wells flies from Brisbane to Melbourne to go to the birthday party, which was also a living wake for a woman who died 3 weeks later, right? She went to St Kilda Beach on the Saturday and made a minor announcement at a surf club. On the Sunday, she went to an aged care home.
So she was working.
with Karenika.
She did some work engagements.
She posted a couple of things on her Instagram. One of them said, "I'm helping some older people," and I'm quoting, "with their puzzle." Right?
So she was, but she's the aged care minister. She was within.
Sure.
She was
But so why didn't-
within her
why-
capacity as a minister. She didn't go as a private citizen.
No, sure, that's correct. But Tanya Plibersek, Alicia Payne, and Marielle Smith didn't see fit to charge taxpayers to go to the same birthday. Right? And they didn't post a couple of things on Instagram to cover their backside.
I guess, and
that's the problem for
maybe
me.
I am looking at this through too gendered a lens, but I just think about all the egregious stuff that male politicians have done over the years. And you want to talk about the pub test? I don't know which pubs you're drinking in, but, and Annabelle makes this point really well in her column because she sort of compares it to Barnaby Joyce, who's had many crimes against decent behaviour over the years,
No arguments here, yes.
Yeah. So, I mean, I do think that there is a sort of family gender, like, do we want women of, who've got young families in politics? There is that element to it. But, I mean, Paul, what do you think? I mean, what's your sort of view on the balance between, I mean, they're difficult jobs, they involve a lot of travel, a lot of time away from home. Are we just being super mean about this stuff?
Yeah, I think that to me, if I was trying to identify where the gendered element to this debate is emerging, to me, I see it in the way some of her colleagues and people in the opposition are reveling in the criticism of her. She's seen as someone who's been promoted above her station by her critics. She presents really well. She's super confident, super ambitious. And there are many men in the Labor Party who share all of those traits. There aren't quite as many women. And I think she cops an outsized level of focus because of that. Now, having said that, I think part of the reason why people like Jim Chalmers, who is close to Minister Wells, has not been super firm in his defence of her, and really none of her colleagues have really wanted to defend the nitty-gritty of what she's done. And the reason for that is she, if you take the critical view of how she's acted, has used every kind of trick in the book on entitlements. She's gone to Adelaide to go to a friend's birthday party and kind of created a diary of work around it. She's left Comcars for 10 hours outside events.
Yeah.
She's systemically brought her partner to the most high-profile, fun sporting engagements year after year. Now, there is an argument the sports minister should have their partner there.
How many blokes do you think have brought their wives to the cricket and the tennis and what have you over the years?
I've actually called around about this with former sports ministers, Jack, and they did, like, previous sports ministers, many of whom, but not all of whom are blokes, don't. They just don't.
Don Farrell clearly does it as trade minister.
Yes.
And Annika Wells clearly does it. But I've spoken to
I'm talking about Greg Hunt, Richard Colbeck, Bridget McKenzie.
Yeah. And speaking to some of Annika's, Minister Wells's colleagues this week, even some of her friends who really have been, dealing with her every day, even those people say, look, if she had her time again and applied the front page test on some of this spending, which is that would you want this on the front page of the paper, she won't make these decisions again.
And that is really pivotal, and I think it's probably been a big wake-up call to probably everyone in Parliament, and I bet the opposition is the same. They're getting talkings to about how to be careful. It's like, as journalists, you have the rule of don't put anything in a text message you wouldn't want pinned to an affidavit, right? And I
had a senior Liberal message me yesterday saying, I'm really stunned that the government hasn't found better examples of some of my colleagues' use of entitlements because there are some outrageous ones and they're all sitting there in secret.
And this is the thing, right? It becomes a
Not in secret, hiding in plain sight.
It's mutually assured destruction whenever they start talking about this. So it is really interesting to see the different reactions because I think they all know that there are skeletons in their own closet or their own sort of side that they don't want exposed on the front page of papers.
Jack,
yeah.
you've been around as long as I have, right? Give or take a couple of years as a journalist, and no disrespect to Paul, but he's slightly younger than us.
On
You'd
the
remember
contrary,
that.
I think it's an insult to our. Sorry, yeah, go on.
No, I'll let that one go through to the keeper.
Yeah.
And it's a
I'm trying to
fact.
say it in polite a way as
No, I know,
possible.
you're fine.
You'd recall that Susan Lee got tripped up by
Yeah.
entitlements in 2017, but think back a little further to 2013. The Abbott government's just been elected. Tony Abbott's talking all about how he wants to slow down politics and get back to a more stable, normal age. Former colleague of ours, Catherine Murphy, wrote a great essay in The Guardian at the time saying this is exactly what Tony Abbott should be doing and good on him and all this sort of stuff. You'd remember Jonathan Swan, who's now a correspondent for the New York Times, but at the time was a young up-and-coming
He was
journalist
our
for the Sydney
beloved
Morning Herald.
colleague, and now he's very, very famous in the United
Very,
States.
extremely, terrifyingly famous. He starts breaking a series of stories about entitlements, right? This is straight after the 2013 election, so September, October 2013, about MPs going on 6-week study tours in the bicycle lanes of, Holland and what have you, like people absolutely taking the piss, right? My point is this: about every 10 to 15 years, these entitlements
Yes.
end up getting a bunch of MPs in
Yes.
trouble, and
They never
that's what's
learn.
happening now. It's metastasizing. It's not just Annika Wells anymore, although her use of entitlements is, how would I put it? She's used them to the nth degree. Like, she's made sure that she's claimed every single little small thing, and that's what happened in 2013 as well, right? These MPs back then, they weren't using entitlements outside the rules. They were using them to their maximum
And
effect.
Wells has become, unfortunately for her, she's become the breakout example that sticks in the public's mind. I've been looking at some of the social media stats. A video that the Financial Review put up of her press club performance last week has 1.5 million views. I've had friends who are school friends who laugh at my job and think politics is dumb contact me and just say, what's this all about? This is outrageous.
$100,000
It's
figure.
totally cut through.
Yeah.
It's totally cut through.
And unfortunately,
And there's no nuance. And there's no
No.
nuance in that
And-
debate.
and
But
she's
that's how
become-
things go.
yeah, and James is right. Like, you're in politics for a while. You see these things kind of break out like a little grass fire every now and then, and you never know who it's going to engulf, which is always.
Tropicate 2015 is another example.
Yeah. Well, that's right. And what do people remember about Bronwyn Bishop? Not her long and storied career in politics when she was talked about as a potential leader of the opposition at one point. They remember her chartering a chopper to take how long was the flight?
Yep.
Like 30 minutes.
Oh, it was like
It was like Melbourne to Bendigo
Geelong.
or
It's about
something.
25 minutes in a
Geelong.
helicopter.
Yeah.
I mean, I've never taken it. I assume it's 25 minutes in a helicopter. Like most people, I've only ever driven it.
I thought just on Wells and how she's become the vehicle for all of this grievance out there in the community, which is in some ways unfair to her. But she made this one comment, which I don't think was picked up. I think it was on Wednesday in a press conference she did just before meeting with the Prime Minister at Kirribilli House for the social media event. And I think it's another one of those comments she would take back if she had her time again. She said, I understand people out there don't have much time for the political class and don't give us much breathing room. I mean, that is a really tone-deaf comment to me. Firstly, I think to even acknowledge that you're in a class is not a smart way to speak about the issue. But if you do have the consciousness that you're perceived with a level of unfairness, then you should be much more judicious about the way you go about your decision making.
It's very hard, I think, and politicians almost always get this wrong in my view. It's very hard to show contrition and to take accountability for a situation without it's being seen to back down, and their egos get engaged, and I think that's probably what's happened here. It is interesting. Obviously, James referred to this before, that Annika Wells has sort of sought to draw a line under all this stuff, if you like, by referring all of her expenses and all of her use of entitlements to the Independent Parliamentary Expenses Authority, which is the body that oversees this stuff. She's the only politician to have done so. It remains to be seen whether journalists will keep trawling through this stuff and maybe find more egregious examples from the other side of the aisle, perhaps even. But Albanese, his stance has been to firmly back his minister, right, Paul?
Yeah, well, I was going to make that point. I mean, the referral to IPIA is not a fronting up quickly when the party has identified a problem to take it seriously. Referring to IPIA is a way to cauterise the issue in the medium term, to allow the government to just dampen some of the criticism. It was done on the afternoon before the social media ban so that the minister could meet with the Prime Minister the next day and have as a talking point that IPIA will look at this so they could move on to talking about their policy. There hasn't been at any point an acknowledgement from the Prime Minister or Minister Wells that some of this spending might have been poor judgment.
No.
And the Prime Minister is not – he's really the key decision maker here, not the Minister. There's been no acknowledgement from the Prime Minister that these family reunion entitlements might need to be looked at. And that's in part driven by his determination to not be seen to be giving in, not be seen to have a cabinet scandal that might result in the removal of one of his ministers, because that would diminish the sense that he runs a stable cabinet government that has not lost a minister in his term in office, which he's very proud of. And so the government strategy will be to muddy up the opposition to the greatest extent possible, hope that Christmas comes and we all forget about it, hope that IPIA comes back with not too strong a finding about Minister Wells, and that this all simmers down.
So you think, I mean, there are some people saying that these rules, in particular the family reunion entitlement, should be reviewed, and the PM's saying, no, I'm not going to do that. I don't see anyone on the other side of politics lobbying for it. Are they going to make that an election pledge?
Well, Melissa McIntosh and Simon Kennedy are the only two, as far as I can tell, major party MPs who've said these rules are no good and we need to have a look at them.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, this is the thing. It is I think there is probably a bipartisan agreement or understanding that these jobs are hard on, they all believe that these jobs are hard on the family, they're hard on marriages, they're hard on your relationship with your kids, and you want to kind of leave that stuff alone.
Jackie, you made that point earlier. You make it now. You made it earlier. You're right. These are tough jobs. Politicians do work really hard. Yes, they're well paid, but they deserve to be well paid. And if they were in the private sector as a CEO, they'd, quite likely, a lot of them would be on $1.5 million a year, not $300,000 a year or 240 or 400. Like, to some extent, we do, you do get what you pay for, and there should be entitlements to get people like Annika Wells into Parliament, because I will say it again, she's a very talented minister, right? She's a young woman, or relatively young woman, and I don't mean that in a condescending way. She's got 3 kids. We want people like that in Parliament. That's great. But that does not mean necessarily that she should be claiming some of these expenses. Like, the two things can exist and both be true simultaneously. Some of these expenses don't pass the pub test.
There's a strong argument, and some MPs make this in private, they would never make it in public, that if MPs were all paid more, you wouldn't need these entitlements. You wouldn't need this arcane bureaucratic system which costs a lot of money to administrate and which, when revealed, makes all politicians look like they've got their snouts in the trough, because there's all these little tricks they can use. If they were paid at a higher rate, they could fund some of this themselves, and we wouldn't need to go through this rigmarole. But it's a brave politician who says we should be paid more.
Yeah, exactly.
Paul, I have to interrupt you there for a moment, though, Comma. Annika Wells is on about $400,000 a year as a cabinet minister.
Sure, but most politicians are on $215,000 a year.
240. And look, are you seriously telling me that a person on $400,000 a year can't afford to fly his or her husband or wife or partner down from Brisbane to Melbourne and then back? Like, we're talking about an $800 flight.
And you're right.
They can't afford that. That's what that's what the family reunions are.
She could fund it.
Of course
clearly.
She can afford it.
But James, as you know, like, there are journalists on approximately the salary of backbenchers. They all still have big mortgages. They all still have expenses. And if there is an ability to get a freebie for your partner and you're on $240,000 a year, you probably try and take it. And you're only in politics. You're only in politics for a certain. Well, they do, but they do.
As I said before, an entitlement is an entitlement. So they're not doing anything wrong by using their entitlements. They're literally entitled to them. But it's a very, very controversial issue, and I think most people aren't earning that amount of money, and they do see politicians as being, they're more likely to see politicians as being self-interested. And also the stuff that Annika Wells is doing is kind of fun stuff. I think that's key as well.
That's part of it.
She's not bringing her kids to Canberra to, like, trudge around Questacon like the rest of us do. giving away my
Hey, I won't
children's
hear a bad
holidays or
word
anything.
against Questacon, Jackie. It's National
Nothing wrong
Science
with it, but it's
Museum
not skiing at
for
Thread,
kids
folks.
is terrific.
Yeah, the cut
Yeah,
through
it
here
is in
comes from
Thredbo.
the events that Minister Wells has to go to.
Yeah.
I was speaking to a former sports minister who said that, yeah, they did like to bring their partners to events because if you go to the grand final of NRL or AFL, Gil McLachlan, or sorry, it's Andrew Dillon now, the CEO, or Andrew Abdo at NRL, or Peter Volandis, they all have their partners there too. So you look like you're
it
out
would
of
be
school if you
lonely,
don't have yours. So
and it would be a little bit lonely and awkward. I mean, they're people, right? Nobody wants to turn up to these kinds of things stag. I get it personally, and I think they want to stay married. So they're like, honey, why don't you come down from Brisbane this weekend and we can spend some time together, even though I have to go to this work event. I get it.
Sure,
But,
sure. Once or twice,
I'm
Jackie, but every grand final for the NRL, the AFL, the Formula One,
I
the
think
skiing.
we're never going to solve this argument. All that we can agree upon is that taking your kids to Questacon in Canberra on the holidays is a great family fun adventure and very cost of living friendly.
Yeah, no, it's a terrible idea, and it's a recipe for a giant headache. And I can say that as the father of 3 young children. They have fun, we get the headache.
Yeah. Anyway, see you at Questacon over the summer. We will, of course, be recording next week. James, thanks so much for coming on. It was a very lively debate with you, as always.
Yeah, pleasure, Jax.
thanks, guys.